Your turn, Yugi boy.
What is up, guys? This is Linthio coming at you today with a 3-part special. Since we are in the Forbidden Unlimited list season, at any point we should be expecting a ban list at some point soon in the next month. Thought I would take some time to talk about the actual Forbidden section of the Yu-Gi-Oh list. This is going to be a 3-part section, first talking about the monsters, then the spells, and then the traps in depth. And the reasons why they were banned, and personally me giving my full opinion on what place these cards have and where. And I'm going to be doing it by a traffic light system, which is basically red, amber, and green. Red means this card cannot come back, in my opinion. Yellow means it could come back under certain circumstances. And then green means, hey, why is this card still banned? So without further ado, we'll jump straight into it. And this episode is just about the monsters. So starting us off, we have the first Qliphort monster to be ever banned, Qliphort Towers, in the TCG. This card was most recently banned effective the 9th of November 2015, and it was one that was a very interesting one if you ask me, because I didn't exactly see why they wanted to get rid of it. It was a key card in Qliphort. At the end of the towards the end of the format, it was basically a Qliphort turbo deck that was just kind of crazy. You just use Monolith and just spat out your towers and then drew a lot of advantage, mainly 3 cards off it to be able to be used next turn. It was immune to the spells and traps and, you know, monsters below level 10. It was an incredible card, but I don't feel that it should have been hit. There are a lot more cards in the Qliphort deck that you could have technically hit, and it would have reduced the risk of having towers, but I feel that towers is now kind of getting to the point where it's being power creeped, and I don't particularly believe towers should have been hit. I think if you left it at 1 or just put it at 1, it would have been fine, simply because you can get over 1 towers, no problem at all. The worrying aspect was people putting out multiple towers on one board, and that was very difficult for some people to overcome. But now that we have pendulums that are very, very good at just being able to swamp the board, we have monarchs that can kind of put up with towers. If I'm completely honest, it's kind of a weird thing that I don't think it should be really banned anymore, simply because it's kind of a, you know, it's alright. So personally, towers, I feel, can be given a green light to come back. You can test it at the 1, but no one's using Qliphort right now, and no one probably will, because the deck's kind of a bit of a weird one. It's not as powerful as it once was. If you do get rid of that scout, if that scout gets removed in any way, shape, or form, the deck really cannot function in the way that it used to. Next up, we have the Dragon Rulers. I'm going to do them all in sequence altogether because it makes sense. Now, there can be an argument to say, well, 1 of them can come back or 2 of them can come back. I'll get to that in a sec. But speaking of the Dragon Rulers, they were first banned in the April format of 2014. And I was personally very angry about this hit, simply because it meant that I could not play my Dark Matter Turbo deck. But that's besides the point. We all may have seen the video of me kind of raging out about that. If not, you can make sure to check my channel out at some point. But the Dragon Rulers were, and I still think are, the most powerful level 7 dragons, if not the most powerful dragons in the game as a set. The amount of advantage they could generate and the amount of pressure they could put your opponent under, with the combos of making some crazy plays, it's just kind of ridiculous. If we look at 2 XZ cards that we have in the format right now that are technically available to us, we have the Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon, and we also have the Odd Eyes Rebellion Dragon, 2 very powerful monsters. And just think, Dragon Rulers could, if they were here now, could simply just be, okay, I'm just going to make these 2 on board, no problem. That is kind of crazy. Being able to special summon easily from your hand or the graveyard by just banishing any 2 dragons or the same type that you're trying to special summon was so good. If, for example, we only had 1 of each of the rulers, then it might be a bit interesting because they can search out another copy, but I just think they're too risky, and especially when you combo them with Sacred Swords 7 stars, which is now at a 3 of, it's unlimited for us, and you have Golden Sarcophagus, which could technically search out other things. I think that the Dragon Rulers right now need to stay banned. They should be on a red light. They need to not come back because they are so powerful, and there's so many good cards coming out. We have the Blue Eye support, and imagine Blue Eyes with the Dragon Rulers. It'd be kind of a little bit crazy. Now, I'm not saying that the Blue Eye structure deck, or well, it's not the structure deck really, it's the cards that are coming out in Shining Victories next set are broken in any way, shape, or form. They're very good, but we don't want to add Dragon Rulers into meta decks because it's just kind of a little bit ridiculous. So personally, I think they're red light. They need to stay banned and not come back for a very long time. Next up, we have Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End. First banned in 2004, would you believe it, in September. And this card is quite close to my heart. I really do love this card, but straight away, red light. This card was the epitome of game ending. Massive attack, easily summonable, nuking the board, burning, had everything. Card was just so good, and it would be used very often in the Yatta lock because, you know, it would just be so good. And Chaos Emperor Dragon was one of these cards that has been errated recently, but I still feel that the errata is just as good as the original effect. Now, I know you might say, well, what's the point in them errataing it? Of course, it's not as powerful. Well, no, it's not as powerful, but the card is still incredibly good, and I feel that it should really not be coming back into this day and age. Now, you might be saying, well, there's not really that big of an element on light and dark decks, on Twilight decks. Well, no, there isn't, but people still throw Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning into certain decks, and that is an incredibly powerful card. You have Envoy of the End in decks that are just thrown in. Oh my days. People who weren't around in that format or have never gone up against this card, it is a scary sight to lose everything you're trying to play with and resort to top decking. It's just kind of uncrazy. It's just kind of crazy. It is unlimited in the OCG due to its errata, and that might prompt some people to say, well, let's try it out here. I personally am torn. I say it's a red light. I do want it back because I want to be able to play Chaos Emperor Dragon Envoy of the End again, but I don't want it back for the same reason that it can be ridiculous by sending everything to the graveyard. So it's a bit of a weird one for me. Chaos Emperor Dragon would be nice to try. If Konami are in a forgiving mood for certain cards, they want to try something out, I think this would be a very good time to start, but I think Chaos Emperor Dragon should probably not be coming back anytime soon, even with its errata for the TCG, because I think it might just be a bit too powerful and a bit too abusable. Next up, we have Cyber Jar, most recently banned in 2006 in September. What can you say about Cyber Jar? If you've never known, or you've never played against Cyber Jar, this card flips up and destroys all monsters, and then you can special summon level 4 or lowers. You basically excavate, which would be the new text now, excavate the top 5 cards and then special summon level 4 or lower monsters. You'll basically just swarm the field. It would be used as an out to OTKs and different things like this back in the day. Now, there's a couple of different arguments to say that, well, flip effects aren't very predominant anymore, and, you know, Cyber Jar has aged badly. That I can kind of understand. Like, flip effects aren't as good anymore, even with Potter Taboos is something that has 3 now banned effects and 4 non-banned anymore. It's still a ridiculously good, abusable card. Being able to swarm the board is the impressive thing. If it was just destroy all monsters on the field, then that would be a little bit different. But the fact that you can special summon from the deck as well, your opponent also has the same thing, but you can special summon, it's kind of ridiculous. Also, the choice at being able to either summon the level 4 lowers in face-up attack or face-down defense, that's kind of really important because it means that there's no real downside to it. Being able to just special summon any monsters that you can from those 5 excavated cards is really crazy, and it means that if you are playing other flip effect cards, you can benefit from setting them face down and everything like that. Just imagine it in Shaddolls. I'm just going to put all my face down monsters there, and it's just so good. Personally, Cyber Jar should never come back. I played in the formats when Cyber Jar was legal, and it was just crazy. And I think that people just don't understand how powerful this card is still. And I just think that we should never see this card in the light of day, because the moment you attack into that face down card and it's a Cyber Jar, you know you're screwed. Next up, we have the wonderful Stein banned in 2006. And yeah, what can you say about Stein? Very powerful card. But I think this is one of the first cards that can be given a green light on my list. Now, you might be thinking, well, Cyberstein, such an incredible card. It was an incredible card back in the day. You could special summon out things like Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, equip with Megamorph, attack for 9,000. Also, Naturia X Tiro, and also Lasso from Another Planet. Loads of really good cards that, excuse me, could potentially give your opponent a lock. Especially if you have, like, the whole DNA surgery and the one the OCGs did, which was calling Psychic type, and then Brain Research Lab, and all these different things that made that you didn't have to pay cost. It can also be searched out by Gigian X in this day and age, which obviously we didn't have back then. But I feel, even with all these crazy combos, and even with all this random stuff, Cyberstein can come back, no problem at all. The problem that Cyberstein faces is it has been power creeped in the way that its effect can be negated so goddamn easily. 5,000 life points to get Fiendish Chained, Breakthrough Skilled, Effect Veiled, Solemn Striked, Solemn Warnings, anything like that is kind of ridiculous, and you basically just kill yourself. Cyberstein was once a very powerful card, obviously being banned, that's why it's there. It's been banned for nearly 10 years now, and the card is still really powerful. There's a lot of different targets you could possibly go with it. However, as I said, the fact that its effect can be negated so easily and you're paying 5,000 life points is just a little bit too ridiculous, a little bit too high. If people want to try and go balls to the walls with the effect, with a deck for this, they want to try and do the whole psychic type thing, sure, but I don't think it's going to work. Personally, Cyberstein can be a green light on my list. Dark Magician of Chaos is next, banned in 2008. It was originally limited in 2004, and it finally got its ban 4 years later. Dark Magician of Chaos is unlimited in the OCG, I do believe, and it has had an errated effect. Now, the reason why this card was so good back in the day was because no matter how it was special summoned, you would be able to just get back a spell card from your graveyard. For example, the loops were way before it was even limited. This is why it was limited. You could special summon the Dark Magician of Chaos, and if you had a Monster Reborn in your graveyard, you could just Monster Reborn, get Dark Magician of Chaos, the second one, the third one, and reborn another monster. So it'd be used with things like Painful Choice. You would make your opponent put all of your Dark Magicians into the graveyard just so that you don't have one in hand. But then if you did have something like a Monster Reborn, you could bring it back and start looping. You could also banish monsters if it was destroyed by this card, and that was so good as well because, you know, it was just really, really powerful because it was just ridiculous. And then there were so many loops with also Dimension Fusion and all this crap. Now that the errata is in, and if you think about it, how many good spells we have, there's not that many. One of the limited spells that we have is Book of Moon, which arguably I don't think should be a 1 anymore. And the other cards like Raigeki and Dark Hole, Dark Hole's played at 2, so there's no reason to really get that. Raigeki is not really that great anymore. Still a great card, but in the format that we have now, especially with Pendulums, all you do is clear the board for 1 turn and then they're back. Demock is a great card and a really nostalgic one for me. It was rumoured to be coming back when the Prophecy archetype was around, but now it's just not really been there. It's, you know, the Prophecy have gone and there are no real that great spellcaster decks anymore, and this card can't really be that abused if I'm completely honest. So I think this is a green light to come back at least 1. Just give it a go and I guarantee you it's going to be at 3 if they do try it out. Next up, Destiny Hero Disc Commander, banned 2008. Yeah, red light, red light, red light. This is kind of a definition of a card I never want to come back because the effect is just so ridiculous. It's a pot of greed. It's a simple pot of greed when it's special summons. Like, there's so many ways to bring this card back. You have Call Haunted, you have Soul Charge, you have Oasis, you have everything like that. You can just bring this card back. It being a level 1 kind of works with Kinkabayo as well. Imagine that goddamn deck, my god. Disc Commander should never come back. The free advantage this card can give to anyone is just too good. And that's why it was banned. The fact that it was just pot of greed, pot of greed, pot of greed. It was just so good. Now you might say, well, pot of greed's banned and this is banned. Which is better? Well, to be honest, because this can be abused in multiple ways. It's much harder to get spell cards back, even though things like Magician of Faith are unbanned. And at 3. Destiny Hero Disc Commander is far more abusable. Yes, it is a bit slower than technically playing a Pot of Greed, but this is just too good, and I never think this card should be back. Next up, we have the Jinn release of Rituals banned in 2015. Now, there was obviously a big controversy with the whole Jinn swapping out with the Patrick Hoban scumbag move, and all of this stuff, and, you know, Jinn is certainly an interesting card that, yeah, that shouldn't be banned. This is a green light card, if I am completely honest. The reason why it's a green light card is because the whole reason it was abused and considered fearful was because of Necros. Now, Necros aren't really that much of a deck, and be honest, Necros isn't that much of an archetype anymore with a lot of hits that they have had. The Jinn should be unbanned. Give that support to just ordinary ritual decks that it does need, because this was one of the best cards you could use. Even with my Herald Chaos version, it could be used with this. The Jinn shouldn't be on here at all, in my opinion. There are no really weird loops. There's nothing like that, and there is monster removal now, so, you know, the Jinn can come back. Next up, we have the magnificent Elemental Hero Stratos banned in 2013. And, well, what can you say? Every time there is a Forbidden Unlimited list from Konami, you are guaranteed to have an Elemental Hero Stratos free my Stratos. Person coming up everywhere. Everyone loves Stratos. I don't know what it is. Everyone just fears that the injustice on Stratos' ban was kind of crazy. Back then, Stratos was a really great card, and it had a lot of hands in different decks. There was an Airblade Turbo deck back in the day of 2006, I do believe. And obviously it was just a predominant card in the hero deck. Now, heroes have continued to be predominant and live after Stratos' ban. However, they aren't the same thing. I was playing heroes when Stratos actually got banned in 2013, and it was painful because the Gate Hero version that I was running, Stratos was just so important in there. But if we break down Stratos, his normal or special summon effects were just great. Normal summon, search out a hero. Special summon, pop cards. Pop back row on your opponent's side of the field. Just so good, you basically didn't lose advantage from playing the card. Being able to special summon it, or being able to search it out as well, the hero lives, E-Call, Rota, Summon a Monk, so on and so forth. Really great card to use. Now, can Stratos come back? My answer is yes. Stratos is certainly a great card, but it can come back to 1. Now, come on, you've got to give it. Now, a lot of people, which I want to clear up, say, well, this deck gets this certain card that searches like Deneb, and this deck gets this certain card. The reason why Stratos is still banned is because it has 2 incredible effects. Being able to pop back row when it's special summoned and being able to search when it's normal summoned is ridiculously good. Konami are pretty famous for making double, triple, or multiple effect monsters or cards and then banning them. The card is just great. It can come back. I'd probably put an amber on it if I'm completely honest, because it depends on the format and everything like that. Heroes are still a pretty good deck the way that you want to play it. And yeah, so I say it could come back to 1 and just leave it at that, and let's see how it goes, just to also shut people up. Next up, we have Fiber Jar. Fiber Jar banned in 2005, in April 2005, I think is one of the cards I will never, ever want to see ever come back in the TCG. Fiber Jar is banned and has never come back in any formats. It was first in 2004, I think it was, and then also in 2005. 2004 was the first time, and then a year later, 2005, it was rebanned. And the card's just dumb. So for people who don't understand Fiber Jar, when it was flipped, it reset basically everything, apart from your banish zone. So you could basically banish your opponent's entire deck, and then flip this, and they wouldn't be able to use those cards for the rest of the duel. So it was just kind of crazy. And also the fact that if we think of if someone is playing Fiber Jar in a large-scale tournament, you flip up Fiber Jar, you reset everything. Now, how much longer is that round going to take? The fact that someone actually created this probably wasn't thinking of tournament play, simply because it's just so goddamn bloody annoying. The fact that someone will flip it up and you just be like, well, there's like half an hour added onto this round. It was just dumb. And that is one of the main reasons why it should never come back, just because it promotes such dirty, dirty long tournaments. And the fact that its effect is ridiculously good. You might say, hey, it's a flip effect, it's slow. No, like, don't speak to me. Don't give me that excuse. This card is stupid and should never, ever, 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 ever come back. Fishborg Blaster was banned in 2011 in September, and yeah, this card was just infinitely a reusable tuner that was dumb. So it's a water, and if you think what it could be used with now, back in the day, now in this day and age, Mermails. Mermails are the first thing you think of. Fishbowl Blaster simply created ridiculously easy OTKs and was used with the Super Ancient Deep Sea King card itself, being able to break things and use Formula Synchron and TG Hyper Librarian, just constantly using all of them, of which Librarian is limited now, but the Fishbowl Blaster was just basically created to cause OTKs, and yeah, should never come back. This card is a red light, simply because as long as water cards exist, as long as, the Atlanteans and the Mermails exist, this card should never come back, just because it will create those ridiculous loops, those ridiculous OTKs, and, now that Trishula is unbanned again, it can just keep going into Trish. Magical Scientist is a very interesting one. First banned in April 2005, it was just a great card that could basically cause an FTK with Catapult Turtle. Now, the Catapult Turtle has been errated to once per turn. I feel that it could still also lead to swarms of XYZ monsters. Its effect, say, paying 1,000 life points to special summon a level 6 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, is just kind of good. The fact it isn't a once per turn effect, the fact that you can just keep on summoning them, yes, that fusion monster cannot attack your opponent directly, and it is returned to the extra deck at the end of the turn, doesn't really matter. This card can be used with, like Stein can be used with a psychic type effect of psychic type loop with the DNA surgery and brain research lab and such, so you can just keep on summoning out of the extra deck. Also, it can be summoned, with much better cards like 1-for-1 and Where for Art, that it can be done. And because it is a spellcaster, it can technically be abused in the spellcaster deck, but I think that's going a bit of a stretch. Magical Scientist is a really, really good card, and I've always been on the fence with this, simply because depending on the format you're in, depending on the cards that are actually available to it, this could be so abusable. Now, you might say, hey, well, there's a lot of effect negation running around right now. Yes, there is. However, 1,000 life points to potentially do OTKs on your opponent is slightly unfair. With Cyberstein, you could pay 5,000 life points, and then, yeah, okay, you're obviously going to be at a big disadvantage, but you're only paying an eighth with Magical Scientist, and if your opponent doesn't have that effect veiler or that other effect negation, and you just pay 1,000 life points just to basically test the waters to see if your opponent's going to negate it or not, and if they don't, then you have free reign on the field. It's kind of really good, so it's more of a amber red light, but I'll give it an amber for now. It could technically be seen as bringing out it could technically be brought back to 1 and we could see how it would go. I don't think many people would really build the whole brain research lab deck unless Magical Scientist and Cyberstein were both in the same format. But I digress. I think it can be tested at 1 and we can see, just because the amount of cards in your extra deck is at 15 and you have a lot of choices. Mikey Aura, Mikey Aura, I have fond memories of you. You were banned in April 2005, and you were one of the dumbest cards ever. Being able to use trap cards from your hand in the turn that you sent Mikey Aura to the graveyard was kind of ridiculous. So it had the effect, it's when it hits the graveyard, no matter what it is. A Foolish Burial, Armageddon Knight, anything like that. Or even when it's sent via an XYZ material, if it was here and then. So you could summon a Monkey out and then start doing stuff like that. Reason why it was banned? OTK decks, including Exodia. So you'll basically just keep drawing your deck, your Jar of Greeds and your Reckless Greeds and all this stuff. You would just activate them from your hand, no problem at all. Just keep on going until I get my combo pieces. So Mikey Aura is a card that I think should never come back, because otherwise these other decks, these like Exodia decks for example, could still be played. The cards are still there. Arguably there are some better cards now for Exodia. And if Mikey Aura was even at 1, I feel it would promote some pretty disgusting decks. Now, I am always a fan of Exodia decks. It's kind of one of my favourite win conditions, just because it's an old school thing, and I would love to see Mikey Aura back just so I could play with it again. But for the greater good, I never want to see it back. It causes too many problems. My Master banned September 2011. This card was used in conjunction with Substitute Toad. And yeah, what can you say about this? Many people will probably remember this with the FTKs and OTKs that you could do with this, including Psychic Borg and all this stuff where you just keep drawing with Gustos. And Emergency Teleporter is unlimited now. It just can't come back. The fact that Emergency Teleporter is unbanned and fully playable at 3, it's just ridiculous. And My Master is one of those cards that I feel should never, ever, ever come back as long as these types of cards exist. It's so easily tutored out of the deck if you have Emergency Teleporter. It's so easily tutored just in general. And I think it is just a very unhealthy card and one that R&D really didn't think of on the day. Morphing Jar, that wasn't too long ago. It was banned. It was in 2014, I do believe. And Morphing Jar was just a really interesting card. It was around for a very long time. High draw card, messed up your opponent's hands, used with Dark Worlds a lot, set up the graveyard, just did so many great things. And when Jackpot 7 was announced, the card was instantly hit. Pretty much, because it was banned alongside with Morphing Jar number 2, which would also, and I'll talk about both of these actually because they're kind of warranted to talk about both of them. Morphing Jar disrupted your opponent's hand, including replenishing yours if you used it at the right time, and Morphing Jar 2 was just basically screwing up the whole board. Both of them were used in the Jackpot 7, OTK, FTK, and, you know, as long as Jackpot 7 exists, these kind of can't really, if I'm honest, exist and come back because it's a bit weird. These can be an amber, if I'm honest, because it does depend on other circumstances currently in the game. But Morphing Jar and Morphing Jar number 2, I think Morphing Jar 2 could technically come back more than anything. I don't think it would actually be used, and the Jackpot 7 loop isn't really that predominant and is quite difficult to pull off at times. But the fact that they're both, well, Morphing Jar 2 is unlimited in the OCG and Morphing Jar is limited, you know, it's pretty interesting. So 2 is unlimited, 1 is not. You get the point. Oh, Rescue Cat, and don't get it confused with Rescue Cat Duelist. 2010, it was banned in September, and the card was an instant +1. Just being able to tutor out the Gladiator Beast, Notorio Beasts, all these incredible cards, and let's not forget X-Sabers. It just spammed the board completely. Being able to be so abusable and can easily be searched out was just an incredible card. Rescue Cat was the original. Then we had Rescue Rabbit, which was basically replaced it by toning it down slightly by only being for level 4s and also normals. Rescue Cat, I don't think can ever come back. I think it is one of those red light cards simply because it can bring out any level 3 monsters. And it doesn't really specify. The fact that you can get a massive boost for a lot of decks is just kind of so good. It can be used with Madolch as well, which is quite interesting, and Fabled, which is another very interesting one, along with Windups. There's so many good cards and so many good decks that this card can simply bring out. Now, I have said that just then it could be a red light. Thinking more, you could technically say it might be an amber. You could try it out at 1 and see what decks can try and use it. I think, again, this is kind of one of the cards like Chaos Emperor Dragon that Konami could test the waters with, much like they did Snatch Steal. They could test the waters with Rescue Cat. Part of me does think that nothing will happen, and a part of me thinks that it's going to unsurface some pretty crazy things, but until then, I don't really have the time to put into, you know, discovering Rescue Cat combos, but I think it's a red/amber, if I'm completely honest. All depends on everything that's happening in the current format. Sangan, banned March 2013. Sangan was once banned in 2004, and now we have it banned again in 2013. I remember this, it was quite funny, and personally this is another completely green card to come back. Now, it is a universal searcher, easily summoned by, obviously with Tour Guide, as everyone knows, and can add certain amount of consistency to certain decks. However, it's just not good enough anymore. Let's face it, guys. Sangan can come back. Just bring it back and it's no problem at all. Green light, universal stamp, get it out. Free Sangan. The only reason I think it's still banned is because Konami can just slap loads of their artwork with it behind bars and everything like that. Next up, we have Sharik Bad most recently at the end of 2015. And yeah, this card can stay banned for a while simply because Necros can technically be a thing if this card came back. Being able to easily bring out the Trishula was always a good thing. But yeah, it's kind of a bit of a weird one if you ask me, just because I think that this does need to stay banned just for a little while. Let the deck tide over, let it get power creeped a little bit, then you can bring it back. So right now it's a red, but in the near future it can be upgraded to an amber. Next up we have Substitute Toad. Oh dear God, what a terrible card this was. Substitute Toad was just a terribly designed card, banned in 2010. Being able to just get rid of your deck for basically one turn, no once per turn restriction, being able to just OTK and FTK with burns in the 2010 March format. Oh my God, the fact that you could tribute a monster on your side of the field, special summon a frog monster from your deck. Then, on addition of that, also a Frog of the Jam couldn't be brought out, rip. On top of that, they couldn't be destroyed by battle. Yeah, okay, let's fuck it. Why not? Let's just add that on top of it. Substitute was a bad card. It was and I say bad card not in a bad way, badly designed. Bad cards. There's no reason why this card should have ever hit the list, ever hit the meta. And I think this is a red card. Red. Never come back, ever. Because these loops can still be found out and can still be done. Next up, we have an interesting one. Tribe Infecting Virus. 2005, in September it was banned. And it was... yeah, it was a very good card back in the day, simply because it meant that you could fuel your graveyard while destroying monsters on your opponent's side of the field, depending on what type they were. Around then, there was kind of a bit of a weird one, because now there's a lot more archetypes that are based on one type. Back then, you would have to discard a couple, probably, depending on if you were playing a type-based deck, but now it's very much archetypes follow a type. Now, the interesting thing is, with Tribe Infecting Virus, it is a water, so it could be nicely used with Atlanteans and Mermails that you would be able to get the effect of. It is level 4, so it can be searched out with different things, and Summoner Monk is one of the best ones. But we did have a card called Tribe Shocking Virus that actually replaced Tribe Infecting Virus. The fact that it wasn't given a once per turn like clause meant that back in the day you could completely wipe out your opponent's field. Now, Tribe Infecting Virus, I feel, can be a amber if not green card to come back, because it's just not as great anymore. There's other cards that can do the same thing. Snipe Hunter, Lightning Vortex, Raigeki, Dark Hole. Even though Dark Hole destroys the whole field, you get the picture. Tribe Infecting Virus is just an interesting one, and one that is amber simply because you don't want it to be abused by Mermails. If you added in an errated clause saying once per turn, Tribe could go to 3 instantly, in my opinion, simply because it takes away the whole predominant effect of it, being able to just select what you want to destroy and also benefit from it. Tribe, as I said, if you errata it can go to 3 and it's a green. Stay as it is, staying now, it can just be a red/amber. Try it at 1 and see what happens. Next up, Victory Dragon, 2006. Pretty much instantly banned. Simply because it was a bit of a weird one. Being able to just win the duel is kind of a little bit iffy. And yeah, it was kind of weird. It does bring up a lot of different unsportsmanlike conduct type of plays. And it's just a massive headache for a tournament, in my opinion. Victory Dragon and any of these cards that state that you can just win the duel outright are a little bit weird, if you ask me. Victory Dragon should stay banned. It's just an unhealthy card, an unhealthy type of card, and should never come back. Witch of the Black Forest bans in 2005 in August. This card back then was just so much more powerful than Sangam was, that is banned, as I have spoken about. Being able to search out monsters like Dark-Armed Dragon. It can be used with Monarchs now, even though Monarchs can search out their flaming mother with all the cards that they've got. It was just so good. It could easily be like used with Summoner Monk now, if it was around. Witch of the Black Forest is a green for me. You might think, oh my god, why would you say that? Well, because it's kind of slow now. It's kind of it's the same thing as Sangan. Being able to search out a card isn't that great anymore if you can't back it up. And Witch of the Black Forest is too, for me, it's just too generic to really apply pressure to certain things and to really cause any crazy loops. Now, I did a talk about Witch of the Black Forest a long time ago, probably early last year, and my opinion really hasn't changed on it. Bring it back to 1, see how it goes, and I guarantee you it's probably going to go to 3 at some point. So Witch can be freed. Finally, for the monsters, or at least the effect monsters, we have the legendary Yatagarasu. 2004, this card was slain down in April. Only really had one format because the card was just so dumb. And it was one of the very first cards to basically put on the ban list. It just prevented your opponent being able to do anything. If you got a clear attack in, which was basically the Yatta lock, if you got the attack in, your opponent could do nothing. If they didn't have an answer to it then, they wouldn't have an answer to it until the end of the duel, simply because Yatta would just keep summoning itself, pecking, and taking your opponent's main phase, draw phases away. I kind of want to see it back, only because I could play it in my spirits, and it is searchable, because we have Aratama, which is a searchable spirit card. I feel this card is a bit of a weird one. The effect is so abusable, it's untrue. You can nuke your opponent's board, you can do certain things to your opponent's field to manipulate it and to kind of get clear attacks in, especially like pendulums now, being able to clear the way if you establish a clear pendulum board and then someone like a Yatta. We aren't really using our normal summon quite often recently, and if we were to have Yatta back in, I think a lot of people would just put it in just as an interesting card to see if they could get it to use, because if you can pull off the effect, it's so brutal. Yatta needs to be an amber/green. Try it at 1, see how it goes. You never know what could happen. Yatta might have actually been power creeped. Next up, we have El Shaddoll Construct. Construct was banned not too long ago, and right now, Construct kind of needs to stay banned. It's literally the best fusion out there. Construct was just so good back in the day when you could actually use it. It was just so brutal. I don't really need to say too much about it because a lot of people who are listening to this will probably know that El Shaddoll Construct and its power, so Construct can stay banned. Thousand Eyes Restrict, banned in 2006 in September, and what can you say about Thousand Eyes Restrict? It was an incredibly good card, being able to take your opponent's monster and then prevent a lock by not being able to let your opponent change battle positions, or only this card could attack. Very good. It was a part of the GOAT control era, as probably a lot of people will know. It was easily revived as well, just because of its low level and attack, so it was pretty decent, and it is a instant fusion target. Now, Thousand Eyes Restrict, I still think can come back to 1. Why? Simply because Thousand Eyes Restrict is not that good anymore. Even if you use it with instant fusion, you are using 2 cards to get rid of one of their cards. And that isn't that great. You can't even attack with it. You can't really do much with it. Even if you summon Thousand Eyes Restrict to your side of the field and combo off, you can't attack with your other monsters. So Thousand Eyes Restrict is kind of one that is just a creeped card. It was predominant in an era where there was a lot of skill, there was a lot of thinking, and the game was very slow. Now, Thousand Eyes Restrict is just too slow for these turbo formats, so that's why I think Thousand Eyes Restrict can come back to 1. It's a green light, let it go. Next up, we have Brio. This was banned in 2012, and oh dear god, what a card this was. Brio was just an incredible card. I don't think should ever come back, simply because it is a easily abusable discard effect that can be activated multiple times in a turn to load up your graveyard. It can be used in Mermails as well, and Atlanteans for maximum pluses and advantage, but just in general it's really good. In zombie decks it was so good because you can just dump all your zombies, and most notably Mizuki's out of your hands, and also with Fabled you can all get your effects. You might be thinking, well, these are decks that aren't really being used very often. No, but if you combo it with any other deck that can, and trust me, if you give these decks a Brio, oh dear god, they will wipe your field out so quickly and generate so much advantage, it is untrue. Brio is a regged light card. Never come back. Never. Either Swan, XTonight. Very new, this card. The most recent list, it came out and was hit instantly. Card is a general nuke for the board. Very easily summonable. and can be chained in your opponent's turn, in your opponent's battle phase, most importantly. Card was very, very good. Now that we have pendulums, I feel that it was a preemptive hit to stop the mass explosion of basically pendulums being able to disrupt your opponent's board so brutally that it kind of hurt the pendulum mechanics, simply because people could play rank 4 decks, just use XTonight to blow away your opponent. Personally, I think this card should stay banned for a little bit, but XTonight could probably come back, put it as an amber, put it at 1, because people didn't really use more than one XTonight in the day. I only ever used 1, if I'm completely honest, but it all does depend on how the format is. So give it an amber, and let's leave it at that. Lavarval Chain banned 2 formats ago. This card was interesting. I didn't really expect it to be hit. I think this card will come back at some point. It does help with some certain loops, but I think it could probably just be, you know, it could probably just be put at a 1, if I'm completely honest. Put Lavarval Chain at 1, and that's kind of all you need to really do with it, if I'm completely honest. Shockmaster was banned in 2013 for us, and is used in the OCG as a 3 of, but not used for us at all. Shockmaster, well, what can you say about Shockmaster? Shockmaster is just such a brutal card, such a good one at that. Being able to just lock down your opponent by calling a type of card, monster spell trap, and then they can't do anything. Easily summonable in rank 4 decks, and there are still always ones out there now. Back in the day when we got it and we could use it in that tin was incredible, by the way. When we could use it against spellbooks, you summon Shockmaster against spellbooks, and you basically won the duel if your opponent didn't have, for example, a priestess in the hand with 3 spellbooks. Shockmaster is just so good still. I think that this card should probably not come back. It's probably, for the sake of the game, a red card. I would love to see it back because I loved using Shockmaster, and I didn't really mind it being used against me that much, even if I did lose to it. However, I think just for the health of the game, Shockmaster should stay at nothing. It should stay at red, and it should be kept banned for a good amount of time. Finally, banned 2013 in March, we have the final card on the list today, which is Windup Carrier Zenmighty. Oh, this was such a disgusting format with the Windup loop. Zenmighty kind of, you know, did enable the whole thing. Even if you got rid of Hunter, I still believe that Zenmighty just kind of promoted some pretty disgusting plays. However, now in this day and age, it is still an easy instant +1. Being able to easily summon out stuff, being generic and all this, was just kind of a bit weird back then. And now, yeah, it's a little weird. It's one of those cards I think is an amber. I think it suffers from being slightly power creep. Windups aren't really that much of a deck anymore. Could they be a deck? If they were back at full power, I still believe they could be a very, very playable deck. Being able to loop your opponent's hand is still a very famous thing. And, you know, it's not that difficult to pull off. There's still a lot of effect negation now, but they still dealt with a lot of the same cards that we have now, even if we may have slightly more or slightly less than that format. Still, Windups could be a very good deck if everything was at full power. Trying Zenmighty at 1 could be something Konami might want to consider, but at the end of the day, it all does depend on what is going to happen with the format. It depends on how the format is shaping up, what other Windup cards are available, and what other cards external from the Windup loop are actually available. Let's not forget Windups, when Zenmighty was banned, they went to a rank 3-4 spam deck with shock locks going everywhere. So Windups are still very powerful, and one should definitely be considered. So that is it, guys. That is the actual first episode of this. I will be talking about the spells and then the traps in the next 2 videos. Obviously, the traps is going to be a very small video, but still, nonetheless, this one is creeping on the hour mark, I think. Oh, it's a 50-minute mark, so it's very interesting. I want to know what you guys think of all of the cards on the list that I have gone over. I hope you are still making it to the end. I realize this is one of the longer videos I have made, but I hope you did enjoy it. So let me know down in the comment section below what you think of which cards should come back. Say, just because there are so many, one card you think can definitely come back, one card you think could come back, and one card you think should never come back. Just give me those 3, because that would be quite nice to see instead of, you know, going over your own list. So as I said, let me know down in the comment section below. Make sure to give me a like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for parts 2 and 3 with the spells and the traps.